before the season began, BYU and Arkansas was one of those games that you had circled for potential intrigue. And I think that's still the case. Both teams come in as undefeated teams. And I think that Arkansas had a little bit of a disappointing game last week, and BYU had that in week one. So both of them are looking for a key win, and they get an opportunity to do that in week three. The quarterbacks will be the position that everyone talks about, but there's plenty of other players that we'll discuss. The first question I have is for BYU. Is BYU built for this? This used to be, and maybe it still is. This was a BYU team that played a Power Five schedule for the most part as an independent team, and they handled their own. They were physical, they ran the football, and they found ways to compete in games that a lot of people didn't expect them to. And now you find a Arkansas team that isn't as good as they expected it to be, but definitely has the potential to get that going. They're trying to look to build a momentum. BYU, do they have the physicality to be able to handle this SEC team? Playing against or Pac-12 teams and Big 12 teams is a little bit different than facing SEC competition. And the proof of that is the backfield for Arkansas. KJ Jefferson is 247 pounds. Raheem Sanders is 243. Good luck tackling that, not being sore the next day. This is a BYU defense that has their hands full with this Arkansas offense, but so far it's a BYU defense that's played pretty well for the most part. They're averaging just 8 points per game for their opponents. They're giving up less than 270 yards a game. So this is a defense that appears to be off to a good start, and stopping this Arkansas offense will not be easy, but they're looking to give it their all. And I think that this is the biggest thing is how does BYU handle the physicality that is an SEC opponent? How do they stop a guy like KJ Jefferson? Because KJ appears to be better as a passer, but he can also give you a lot of trouble as a rusher. I think the biggest thing for both sides is establishing the run. When you look at BYU specifically, like I said before, this is a team that was really good running the football and it was very physical. And right now, they're just not doing that. 79 yards per game will not get the job done. And Arkansas is so far very good at stopping the run, average giving up just 45 yards against them on the ground per game. So you have to be able to run the football. If you're BYU, you have to be able to move the football down the field, and running the football essentially gives you more options than if you were just looking to throw. And the quarterbacks obviously play the biggest role in helping moving the ball down the field, but the rushing attack for BYU specifically will determine a lot about how close this game can be because the Cougars can pull off the upset. I'm not going to say that they can't because we've seen them shock a ton of teams, and Arkansas is no different than the teams that they played before in terms of how beatable they are. It's just that the talent level and the size advantage leans towards Arkansas. Now, the biggest question is you have two quarterbacks that have NFL talent in KJ Jefferson and Keaton Slovis. Which one of them opens up the field more? Yes, the rushing attack for BYU has to do its part, but Keaton Slovis so far has shown us some good things. He's shown us some really exciting throws. He's also shown us some questionable things where it's kind of a head scratcher. So, which one of those Keaton Slovis do we get to see? How do we determine how good he can be? And I think the biggest thing is you'll see what he can do against Arkansas, and that will tell us a lot about where he's going. Same thing for KJ Jefferson. This BYU defense is super underrated, and so far they've done a good job. You have an opportunity to send a message to a BYU team that expects a lot of good things this year, and they have nothing to lose. I think that if you're picking a team that will come out firing, it's probably going to be BYU. They have literally nothing to lose. Everybody's probably expecting Arkansas to win this game. So guys like Slovis and the rushing attack. I think the biggest thing is the rushing attack. So far, LJ Martin's been the more consistent runner. Aiden Robbins has not been what they wanted from him, but I think that this is a team that's looking for a good start, and it really starts with those offenses going against defenses that are playing with a lot of confidence. And like I said, Slovis has made some really nice throws. I don't know if he can continue that. We saw in 2019 what he could do. He was making some really exciting throws for USC, and I think that the confidence is still there. It's just a matter of how does BYU staff extract that from him? How do they get him back on track and find ways to get him in successful positions where he's able to carve up this Arkansas defense? This is an Arkansas defense that is playing with a ton of confidence right now, and it's easy to see why when you look at the number of playmakers they have. I mean, the biggest one is Jaheim Thomas, the transfer from Cincinnati. I did not expect him to lead the team in tackles right now. 20 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. This defense, I think, used to be one of those, like, let's just keep everything in front and make the tackle. It appears that they're a little bit more aggressive now, and maybe that makes a huge difference for them in the SEC West. BYU has their hands full with KJ Jefferson, literally. KJ is working to become more of a passer than a runner, but this offense under Dan Enos wants him to run the football and wants him to be an impact player. And so far, 59 yards, 3.3 yards per carry. I think that Raheem Sanders also, they'd like to see him get a little bit more involved. At 42 yards. He only averages 2.8 yards per carry. This is a rushing attack that, like I said before, both rushing attacks need to get going, and Arkansas is no exception to that. AJ Green's been the highlight of the rushing attack, the running back group so far. Rashad Dominion is also another option. Dominique Johnson, they have options. It's just so far, Frisbee Green that is the more efficient one, and then KJ has the luxury of being a contributor to that as well. That gives Arkansas a lot of things that they can do. It's just a matter of how do you find a ways to move the football down the field against a BYU defense that appears to be better than expected. I think the biggest thing is watching that rushing attack. I still think that Raheem Sanders is the most intriguing player to watch on either of these two teams. I think that he is such a fun player when he's playing at his peak. It's just we haven't seen that yet. And there's a lot of season ahead of him, but the 42 yards, not necessarily what you want from him. Just one game of experience so far, but we will see what what happens with him. And I think that the X factor is Keenan Slovis. His ability to move the football down the field will be the biggest thing for me, for BYU. That's going to be determine a lot about how close this game is. And again, there's a lot of intriguing players to watch, a lot of intriguing matchups, and we'll learn a lot about both teams depending on how this game plays out. And right now, BYU is playing an interesting season so far. It's 2 games, so obviously you can't take a ton into account for what we've seen. You have 2 data points, but the first game against Sam Houston, the offense obviously did not do what they needed to do. 14 points just isn't going to get the job done against better competition. The next team was a little bit better. So how do you build upon that? Arkansas is a tough team to beat. But the fact that they're able to continue playing with confidence, they come into the season, excuse me, this week undefeated, gives them the confidence that they could win this game. It's just a matter of buckling up and be prepared for a dogfight and finding a way to win. Right now, Arkansas to me is the better team. They'll get the win. And it's just a matter of what do we see from both teams that needs to be worked on and which team has more success and can build upon that for the future.